The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We have video of a police officer who was caught attacking and slapping a homeless man. We're talking about Fort Lauderdale, Florida police officer Victor Ramirez, who was filmed. He was trying to escort Bruce LeClaire off of the property of the Broward bus terminal. LeClaire tells Officer Ramirez that he needs to use the bathroom, and Ramirez shoves him to the ground, causing his head to hit the brick, then follows up with, I don't remember seeing such a hard open hand slap to the face as what I'm about to show you in this video. And fortunately, some bystanders caught it on video, and we'll tell you what the impact of this video is. Let's take a look at it first.
Oh.
Relax. I'm telling you right now what's going to happen. I'm telling you right now what's going to happen. I'm escorting you out right now. You're not going to go pee. You're not supposed to be here. Okay? So get up. I'll push you to the ground and I'll beat you up if you're trying to fight me. That's what's going to happen. You're trying to fight me. Oh, okay, I'm just telling you right now. Get up. I'm not. Get up. Get up.
Whoa.
I'm not f***ing around with you. Don't f***ing touch me. Don't f***ing touch me.
So the video has made its way to the Fort Lauderdale Police Department. They've responded to the video. Detective Tracy Figone wrote in an email that the department is aware of the video. Quote, "We became aware of it this afternoon. The chief has been notified, as well as the Office of Internal Affairs. Officer Ramirez, the officer in question, has been relieved of duty with pay for the time being, routine necessary procedure, and increasingly concerns that this is the type of routine unnecessary abuse that is happening to the homeless in particular at the hands of police officers." How can anyone argue that this individual was a huge threat? A bumbling, a stumbling homeless man who seems to have at least some physical ailments. We don't know all the details, but from his physical presence clearly poses no threat to the officer, was already on the ground, and the officer with just a brutal open hand slap on the head.
Yeah, I guess depends on your definition of threat. I'm not really sure. I have a hard time explaining what's happening in this video.
If we had another individual instead of LeClaire who was dressed in a suit and tie with a briefcase and did the exact same things that this individual did, would he have been slapped in the face in the same way and shoved to the ground by the officer? I'm just curious. I don't know the answer.
Maybe. It sounds like the homeless man was getting a little mouthy, and rightfully so. And perhaps the police officer just doesn't like that and won't tolerate that. So I would say perhaps, yeah.
It does appear that the police officer didn't know that this was being filmed, and now we do have the video. And yet again, another instance of when having video is video that was just shot by a bystander who just said, you know what, I'm going to film this. It ends up being really important evidence in policing the police and in disciplining police. And I haven't been an advocate that some people go around proactively saying, always film the police. Anytime you see a police officer, film them no matter what's going on, because you never know what they might be about to do. And my view is most police are good. Most police are police for the right reasons, but the disproportionately bad acts of the small percentage of bad officers are really what is a problem here. So most of the filming, most of the proactive filming of police would go to nothing because most police aren't bad. But increasingly, we're seeing case after case where that random cell phone video ends up being the key piece of informative evidence as far as what took place.
It's changed everything. I think that people should be ready to take out their cell phones and start recording. And if you are having an interaction with police, the second you think things start to get a little weird or strange or out of the ordinary, say, "Excuse me, I'm going to record this," and just get it done. It could help.
A surgeon says that full-body transplants could become a reality within just 2 years. This is Sergio Canavero, who's a doctor in Turin, Italy, has drawn up plans for transplanting a living person's head onto a donor body, and says that the procedures required to actually do this are not that far off. He's hoping to put together a team to look into how to do this at a meeting in June with neurosurgeons in Maryland, neurological surgeons in Maryland. He recently published a broad outline of how it would be performed, and he says that this could be a way to prolong the lives of people affected by terminal diseases. Quote, "If society doesn't want it, I won't do it. But if people don't want it in the US or Europe, that doesn't mean it won't be done somewhere else. I'm trying to go about this the right way, but before going to the moon, we want to make sure people will follow you." And there's actually quite a history of transplantation of instances where people had a new appendage and they hated it and they had it removed. And we're now, as medical science is getting closer and closer to doing things we've never been able to do before, that will have a significant emotional impact. A lot of the conversation, Lewis, has to be along the lines of figuring out the psychological burden of emerging from general anesthesia with an entirely new body.
Yeah, and there's so much to talk about here. I mean, who selects, which bodies are used? How do you preserve that body after the person dies? The procedure, the dangers, and the mental repercussions afterwards. I mean, it's so mind-boggling.
It's massive. What needs to be determined is massive. And the other thing we have to think about is that medical ethics boards would be very unlikely to approve experiments in primates to test whether this works. And I can't imagine that we're going to go straight into doing this to humans. So I don't really know how that's all going to happen. And I must admit, when I first saw the headlines of this, I thought maybe that we were talking about a transfer of consciousness to a new body. But we're actually talking about transplanting the head with the brain and the consciousness to a new body. And there are a lot of surgeons who are not as convinced as Canavero that we're so close to being able to do this medically. And the big thing is actually reconnecting the spinal nerves to make them work again. And without going into any gruesome detail, I think most of our audience can imagine how just transplanting the head wouldn't necessarily give you all the movement that you need.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking an extremely delicate procedure here. And I imagine the only experimentation you will be able to do, at least in this country, would be with someone who has died and then someone who is perhaps about to die. And I mean, I guess those are the only circumstances in which you'd be doing this anyway. But like you said, I don't think it would be right to experiment with primates like this.
And some see this entire concept as vile experimentation. Others see it as kind of pushing humans towards significantly increased lifespans. Obviously, there are religious people who will be against anything like this, period. But even among the non-religious, this is pretty controversial stuff, and understandably so because of the psychological implications, which would be massive.
Yeah, but can you imagine, I mean, some young, healthy person dying from brain cancer and some other person being able to use their body who might have liver cancer, pancreatic cancer, some other type of horrible disease.
Send me your thoughts on this. Very, very controversial stuff. But at the same time, 500 years from now, will this be even considered remotely controversial? Maybe not. History has a way of working out that way. On today's bonus show, Saharan dust is fueling the Amazon. Have we been wrong about peanuts and infants all along? And Lewis will give us a beer review of what he has told me is one of the best beers he's ever had. Get access to the bonus show, davidpakman.com/membership. A lot happening on the bonus show, great member benefits, and you're supporting the work we do, which is always a good thing.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our program is funded directly by our audience through the membership program, and today's new member of the day is Adam Lundstrom. Adam, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. You can also be a member and get access to the bonus show, the commercial-free audio and video podcast feeds, the long-time archive of shows dating all the way back to 2005, and so many more great member benefits. Go to davidpakman.com/membership to sign up today. And remember, if you ever shop on Amazon.com, you can also support our show by first going to our website, davidpakman.com, and clicking on the Amazon banner on the right side of the page. Then just do your shopping, and Amazon will send us a kickback. 4 years ago this week, the internet group known as Anonymous confronted Shirley Phelps Roper from the Westboro Baptist Church on the show. The topic was discussing an alleged letter threatening Westboro from Anonymous. During the interview, Anonymous hacked Westboro Baptist Church. The interview went viral. It was by far our most viewed video on YouTube ever. Over 4.1 million views. I still remember that day, Lewis. It was a crazy busy day.
It was one of the most memorable days. We couldn't really believe that that was happening, and it was it was history in the making.
We never really had follow-up with the Westboro Baptist Church about it. There was the one time where that guy Steve Drain said something about how most of the millions of views are their people, which is of course absurd. There's like 80 people in their church. And Shirley never really told us. I don't think we've had Shirley on since. She's kind of gone off the map. And I don't know if she holds us directly responsible for the hack, which would be insane. I mean, we just created a conversation between Anonymous and Westboro Baptist Church. I do wonder what's going on over there. You know, we had the death of Fred Phelps. The church has kind of not been in the media spotlight lately. They don't seem nearly as interested in speaking to the public. I do wonder about what's going on there.
It seemed to all happen around the time Fred Phelps died. They just seemed to kind of, I don't know, implode. There had to have been some type of internal issue. You know, I can't imagine what it is, and I doubt we're going to hear about it from them.
Yeah, I'm open to the idea of having someone on to talk about what's happened to their church, not just to hear them say God hates fags or, you know, your preacher is a whore or whatever it is that their you know, catchphrases are. I know part of our audience wonders why they haven't been on. A lot of our audience doesn't want them back on because they feel we're just giving attention to a group that doesn't deserve it. But I would be genuinely curious to have a conversation with them, not about their views, but just about what's happening internally at the church. I don't think that that's going to be a conversation they want to have anytime soon.
You have to assume that if they're not talking to anyone anywhere, they're surely not going to talk to us. You know, there's some bad blood there.
3 years ago this week, it was the kind of early lead up to the 2012 presidential election. Rick Santorum making headlines just about every day. We'll go over some of them. Rick Santorum invoked Satan, warned that the American political system may be falling to Satan. He talked about the separation of church and state wanting to, making him want to throw up. He talked about higher education simply being a liberal plot to secularize America. I don't remember exactly when it was, but of course there was the whole thing about blah people that he doesn't want to help, which we think was black people, but he insists was blah people, which might stand for blacks, Latinos, Asians, and Hispanics. I don't know. Rick Santorum was just stepping in it left and right 3 years ago, and I actually hope he runs again next year.
I hope so too. He also famously said that we will never have the elite smart people on our side. And yeah, after hearing him say that, I was thinking to myself, yes, exactly, Rick, exactly. So I'm hoping he runs too. It's going to be quite a circus.
He also made statements that don't make a lot of sense with regard to the other Republican candidates. So this funny thing happens, and I know that during primaries, Democrats criticize other Democrats, and then once the primaries are over, of course, they typically still support them. Same thing applies for Republicans. But Republicans go after other Republicans in a way that is different than how Democrats go after other Democrats during primaries. And I'm not really able to put my finger on exactly what the difference is, but it just feels very different.
Well, during the last Democratic primary, people were scolding the Democrats for being too civil during the debates and for not going after each other enough. They weren't playing hardball. It was kind of a form of damage control, and let's not destroy each other.
There's some credibility loss, I feel like, because when you're hearing forget about the difference between Democrats and Republicans in primaries. When you hear the criticism, like when you hear Rick Santorum criticize Mitt Romney as being, not religious enough or corporatist or whatever, right? Whatever criticism it is. On the one hand, you could say, ultimately, this Rick Santorum will probably support Mitt Romney. And it's clear that he doesn't think he's a good candidate. So it's all political posturing. Or you could have a different angle, which is, Eventually, Rick Santorum is going to support Mitt Romney. So I can't even really take his criticisms seriously because he probably doesn't even mean them. In either way, it's this credibility gap.
Yeah. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do to each other during the next primary. It's going to be great.
It is going to be pretty amazing. I am looking forward to it. 2 years ago this week, Google Earth revealed North Korean labor camps. And Google Earth, which is this satellite tool where you can look at different parts, any part of the planet that you want to look at, has been a really valuable tool for internet users worldwide and researchers. And it used to be you can find buildings or formations shaped like penises or a superhero logo or crop circles or whatever. But it has been really valuable in seeing what is happening in North Korea. And you can very clearly see the labor camps. You can see the lack of infrastructure. You can see so much that we previously couldn't really see. I know I've explored North Korea. When we do stories about things in North Korea, I pull up Google Earth and I take a look at it, and you can really see a lot.
It's a great tool. I'm glad we have it, but it's a shame that our best resources on North Korea are Dennis Rodman and Google Earth.
Yeah.
And I know anytime we have people, usually when we have people entering the country, they are only brought to certain areas, of course. They only see what the leadership wants them to see.
It's a sanitized, chaperoned trip.
Exactly. And so, yes, Google Earth has been an invaluable tool. But, despite learning everything we've learned and seeing the labor camps, there still seems to be no international interest in saving the people of North Korea.
Yeah, and it's the people who are really suffering there, starving people. We know over several generations now, the malnutrition has led to distinctly smaller people than in South Korea. It was previously a completely homogenous society physically between the North and the South. But I wonder if, let's say the North Korean dictatorship did fall, because of the indoctrination, what portion of North Koreans would either fear or totally reject American aid?
I wonder about that. I wonder if foreign aid workers were to show up, if some of these people are so indoctrinated and brainwashed that they would, try to kill or attack these aid workers, or that they would just flee. Who knows?
I think it actually would not be that many, because the recent documentaries we've seen with some of the people who have escaped North Korea, this topic has been discussed, and it's been made pretty clear that no, North Koreans are not as indoctrinated as many people think. There's a lot of pretending to believe the propaganda, but North Koreans are more aware, at least some of them, about what's going on outside of their country than Westerners might think.
And yeah, it's hard to tell because you have to pretend to believe the propaganda. Because if you don't, you and your entire family gets thrown into one of these camps.
We have a fantastic program for you today, and I invite you to follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/dpacman. A lot of trolling on there, but a lot of good interactions with our viewers too.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
We are starting to ramp up again. I know it sounds insane for the next election, the 2016 presidential election. Of course, there will be senators, members of Congress, all sorts of elections happening. And back in July of 2012, right before the 2012 election where Mitt Romney lost, Buchanan, the famed political advisor, conservative political strategist, former treasurer of the United States, was on the show to talk about the 2012 election and Mitt Romney. I want to go back to this interview because I want to remind everybody about the type of completely disjointed and disconnected from logic campaign statements that start up. And sometimes I even forget about it. When we're not right in a campaign season, you see strategists be way more reasonable. And I was reminded the other day, because of something I read about this interview with Buchanan, where she was just making absolutely no sense with anything she said, going completely out of her way, grasping at straws to defend Mitt Romney and his business credentials as a good reason for why he should be president. So let's go back to this interview from July of 2012. Prepare yourselves for this type of thing with the next election that's coming up. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. Joining me is Bay Buchanan, conservative political strategist, former treasurer of the United States. The new book is Bay and Her Boys, Unexpected Lessons I Learned as a Single Mom. Bay, you're advising Mitt Romney. Let's talk about, initially, why do you endorse him?
Well, there was a couple, actually 4 years ago I endorsed him because I was with Tom Tancredo. I thought that immigration issue was key. I knew McCain was terrible. And so I met with Governor Romney to see what his position was on immigration and to get a sense for the kind of person he was. And I endorsed him then. I traveled to New Hampshire for him. I got to know him very well. Very, very impressed with him. And on those key issues, as we looked into 2012, the key issues facing the country, clearly we need someone who really has an understanding of how to run an economy, how to put people to work, how to help businesses grow, what kind of national or federal policies you need. So you create that kind of environment. I'm devastated by the millions of people who are unemployed in this country and facing very, very tough times. And so I thought, okay, the first thing we need is somebody who not only is informed and understands the issue, but has that kind of toughness, that determination to say, listen, this company is going to get turned around and I'm going to do it. I don't care what it takes. And he doesn't have ties to Washington. So I felt that Mitt Romney was, without question, the best person for the country at this time. I know he's strong on the social issues, very close to my heart. He is solid pro-life. I am absolutely certain of that.
All right, now let's hold on. There's so much there that we have to talk about. So let's see if I can let's take it a step at a time here. So number one, on the issue of he has the right ideas for federal policy. Now, to me, the biggest accomplishment he had as governor of Massachusetts, the health care bill that he passed, he's had to completely disavow at the federal level, and has been very clear it wouldn't work at the federal level. He's actually had difficulty distancing himself from the idea that it would work federally. So specifically, what federal policy can we point to that indicates he would have good ideas there?
All right, well, first of all, he's a guy that goes into a business and looks at the whole thing and assesses it, and he's done this extremely well over the years, been very, very successful at turning around companies. So he understands sometimes you have to make this tough decisions and shut down some arm of that company or turn this around or make people more efficient. Whatever you had to do, he has been enormously successful too. When he went over as governor, I think you're wrong as to his greatest accomplishment in Massachusetts. He took over a government that was facing a huge deficit, and the last in line for number of jobs created, number 50. And in 4 years, he not only turned that state around economically, they moved him up to about, I think it was about 27th in job creation, little state of Massachusetts.
No, it was 48th, actually. It wasn't good.
No, that is not correct. That is something the Obama people are putting out. It is absolutely inaccurate. In fact, no state was able to jump as many notches up as Massachusetts in those 4 years. What the Obama people have done is averaged the 4 years. But if you look at where it was when he took over and where it was when he ended, it is clear success story. In addition, he balanced the budget, left them with a surplus, did it without increasing taxes. In fact,
let's talk about that, though.
Taxed 19 times.
Yeah, you know what's incredible to me about the he didn't raise taxes thing? I live in Massachusetts, so I experienced this firsthand. The exact same way through which he was able to raise revenue without raising taxes, which is by penalties and fees, is the exact same thing he's trying to play the other side of the ballgame on the Obamacare mandate, whether it's a tax or whether it's a penalty/fee. Fees and penalties everywhere in Massachusetts, and I paid them, went way, way up. So it's silly to say that by not calling it a tax, he didn't actually increase fees, taxes, etc. It's kind of a semantic game.
Well, no, it is not if, and I don't know the case for every single fee up there. Yeah. But I was in the Reagan administration, and I was in the Department of Treasury, and I was young. I was the U.S. Treasurer. And so I really made an effort to learn as much as I could about the economy and sat down with a lot of the supply siders. And they explained to me, Norman Ture, just a wonderful man, and was the undersecretary, and he explained that there are certain things that conservatives support. So in other words, if we're using the roads, we should pay for the roads. So there's a certain portion, unfortunately not all. You know, when you have a tax on gas, if it's going right right to the roads, that's something we would support. Like if you go out to a national park, and I use the national park, you have to pay a fee to get into the national park. That makes sense. That is something conservatives accept because, we're using it. So we should be paying something that's a direct user fee, if you like. And in that regard, and as I said, I don't know all of the things that were called fees up in Massachusetts, but in that regard, that's something conservatives do support. And now, unlike the Obamacare, which has 21 taxes in it, and in fairness, no conservatives was calling it a tax until our Supreme Court justice decided that that's what it was.
Yeah, but in the discussion about Romney in Massachusetts, I mean, for example, not raising the excise tax rate, but raising the renewal for your car registration by $60, it's essentially the same thing. Money's going the same place. You're just calling it a fee rather than a tax. Same thing we're seeing with Obamacare. It's a little bit wishy-washy. I don't know that that's the strongest case to make as a Romney supporter for you.
Well, I do know without question he cut taxes 19 times. Now, did he raise taxes some other times?
Of course.
I do know that there was cutting taxes. He obviously was able to get control of the spending to line it up with the income, because as a result, he balanced the budget and left a surplus. That's something I would like to see on the federal level. I think he's shown experience both in the private sector and in the public sector, that he is tough enough to do the job that needed to get done so that you have a strong economy in the state of Massachusetts, or a business has a strong, economic basis to continue to grow. And I hope that he's able to do that on the federal level so America can get back to work.
Well, let's talk about the Bain experience, which you alluded to. So much is going on, and I know we have limited time, but a few different things I want to touch on. Number one, he has made his business experience kind of like the paramount achievement on which we should decide whether he would or wouldn't be a good president. He says he would be a good president as a result of his experience at Bain. What other presidents in history can we point to where coming exclusively with business experience ended up being good presidents? Who would you point to?
Well, I think the key is I would point to the president who's there now. He has never been in business. He has never met a payroll, and he has no knowledge, never owned a business, is clueless as to how it's done, and doesn't respect those who have done it. And
how is that hurting him?
And I think as a result of that, we today, unlike other times in our history, are facing terrible economic times. I mean, a crisis is not to exaggerate the situation.
No, I understand, babe, but we're switching topics here. We're switching topics. You're saying Obama...
A guy who has no knowledge of business, doesn't have a clue as to how it's working. He established his policies that take us from a recession that he inherited and gives us a weak, anemic, jobless
recovery. But babe.
It falls right back into a recession we're looking at now.
I respect what you're doing. You're pivoting from my question about Romney into talking about Obama talking points. But hold on a second, babe. Hold on a second.
You can ask whatever questions you want, but the key is...
And you can answer them however you want. I understand. You're pivoting.
Relevant today is not when Eisenhower, who had no business experience, only military, took over, and look what happened.
But let me just try it once more.
Somebody with that.
Okay, let me try it once more. Forgetting about Barack Obama for a second. Mitt Romney says, and many of his supporters agree, that someone with so-called business experience is uniquely and particularly well qualified to be president.
At this time.
What can we point to in history that would suggest that coming from business experience makes you a good president? And if we can't point to anything because this time is so unique, we really have no evidence. It's just a guess, right?
No. This is... you can look all at history, but we got two choices here.
Okay.
That's what it's down to. And in the primary, I supported him because there's another aspect of his... First of all, you have to understand how it's done. You have to have appreciation for what makes an economy work, what's healthy for them out there in the middle America. How does that... what can we do to make their companies thrive so they can start hiring again? Okay.
But so we have no actual evidence that that's good.
The second thing is this. We need somebody who will actually do it. because so many of these politicians are stuck here in this town for too many years, have too many friends. So when it comes time to chop the interior department or the agricultural department or education, oh, my friend here, my friend there, Joe's district, that would hurt him. And then they can't come to grips with it. They start taking care of their friends. And that's what happens. Even some of our friends, I might add.
But even this idea that you're alluding...
He does not have those ties, David. He doesn't have any of those ties.
Yeah, but you know what?
He is a man that is focused on turning around companies or states or the Olympics, and he will be focused on turning our economy around, which is all what his whole background is everything he's learned.
Yeah.
I cannot be anybody better prepared to be president of the United States at this time.
Okay. This whole idea that he's a Washington outsider, if he's a Washington outsider, it's because he lost an election in 1994. He wanted to be a Washington insider. But let's put that aside.
You have to become an insider by living here and gaining all these friends. Just because he lost an election,
he doesn't have any Washington friends.
He is an insider, but because he might have been. Come on, David, let's use the census. The man does not have the ties to this town that all of those other candidates in the primary did, or most all of them.
He gets his money from all the same people that the so-called insiders do. There's no difference. It's indistinguishable.
No, it's well.
Money is totally fungible. Whether he's an insider or outsider, it comes from the Koch brothers. It comes from all the same people. What's the difference?
No, I'll tell you what the difference is because you get in that Senate, you get in the House, and you become compromised in some manner or another.
Okay.
You explain to me how it is that conservative House, a conservative Senate, and a so-called conservative president gave us the largest entitlement since LBJ. Now, you explain how that happens if indeed they stand on principle when they get here. I say they get co-opted. They feel they have to keep the leadership and the party happy.
All right.
Mitt Romney doesn't have any of those ties. When he comes here, he's got one thing in mind: cut the spending down to some reasonable percent of the GDP, back to the 20%. That's what he will do. He's not going to worry about who it offends.
All right. Well, I wanted to get into all of the details of the Bain stuff, including also Mitt Romney's outsourcing of the Olympic uniforms to Burma, even though now he's criticizing the current outsourcing to China. But unfortunately, we've gone over our time. I really do want to have you back, though, Bay. And let me mention again, the book is Bay and Her Boys: Unexpected Lessons I Learned as a Single Mom. Bay Buchanan. We don't agree on the politics, but it's really great to talk to you.
I just have to ask, David, you voting for Obama? Because there ain't any other choices.
I'm voting for President Obama. Given the two choices between Romney and Obama, I'm voting for Obama. Absolutely.
Okay, well, he has already failed us, so we know what direction he's taken the nation.
Okay, Bay. Thank you very much for the interview.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It is time to answer your questions. Really good ones this week. Remember, you can submit them to us really however you want. Twitter, Facebook, voicemail 219-2DavidP is the number. Email us, whatever makes sense for you. Sean wrote to me. Sean said, last year while renovating my bathroom, my wife expressed a strong desire for a bidet to be installed on our toilet. This was a small one, but we still needed to get its own hot and cold lines put in. At first, I didn't know what the big deal was. However, it didn't take me long to fall in love with the thing. And now, frankly, I cringe every time I'm at a public toilet and I'm forced to use paper. It just doesn't seem to do a good job. What's the deal with toilets in North America? Was there some kind of paper industry conspiracy to waste paper? Have either of you used bidets, if I may ask? What is your opinion on this matter? Please avoid graphic detail. I'm from Argentina. In Argentina, bidets are standard. I've spent time in different countries in Europe, and many European countries also have bidets as standard. So yeah, I completely understand what Sean is saying, which is that from any kind of simple analysis, you would understand, and we don't, by any means, Louis, we don't have to go into any specific detail, why the concept of a bidet seems much more hygienic than using paper.
And less wasteful. I think that's one of the arguments. I have used them, and I guess it's fine. I mean, I'm used to what I'm used to. That's just, it's just the way it is here, and I don't know why they're not more prominent. I guess I haven't really thought about the toilet paper lobby. Perhaps that is at play here.
I think that it may be a factor. Would you be in favor, though, of an American movement towards bidets, which I know there would be a significant contingent that fights it, saying we're not going to be like those European socialists?
They would probably say that. I'm fine with it. Why not? Let's. It seems like it could avoid. Or we could save some trees. Let me put it that way.
Now, the other thing I want to clarify is sometimes Americans don't actually understand what a bidet is because they see only these. Typically, the bidet is a separate thing, right? There, you have your toilet, and then totally separate from that, there's a bidet. It's almost like a mini bathtub, you could almost say. About toilet sized. And that's the way it is in countries where bidets are traditional. In the US, they make these rings that go on your toilet, which function like a bidet. And a lot of people that I've spoken to misunderstand, and they think that is actually a proper bidet. Some bidet confusion, Lewis, as I like to say, in the United States. But those are kind of like makeshift turn your toilet into a bidet things. That is by no means the bidet that other countries are now used to.
Yeah, and you can also get toilets that are kind of like hybrids, not just you place the ring, but designed so that they are kind of the 2-in-1 type thing. Both exist.
All right, so I would have no problem whatsoever if the U.S. started going in the direction of becoming a pro-bidet country. I would predict significant resistance to that. I don't know if it's an issue that the religious right would necessarily take up and fight, but I think that there would probably be some resistance there. Dion wrote to me. Dion said, when talking about gay sex and it being different from child molestation and animal sex, the obvious line is that there is consent, which I agree with. It makes all the sense in the world. But my question is this. Let's say in the future, for some reason, someone has developed the technology that could determine whether or not an animal was given consent to a human to have sex with it. Would you, in that case, be in favor of animal sex? So this is interesting because when we hear about if two men can get married, you could marry a horse. Well, the horse can't consent. Two men who have sex are consenting, whereas having sex with an animal, there is obviously no consent, and thus the slippery slope argument from the religious right is ridiculous. If animals could consent, though, would there be still a basis to oppose having sex with animals? There's a complication, though, because even if you could determine through some kind of, you hook up an animal to like a brain scanner, and you determine the animal is interested in having sex here, it is consenting. Animals are still not as intelligent as humans, so being able to determine that the animal is, quote, giving consent does not tell us that they have the exact same capacity to do that an adult human has. So consent might mean the animal is in heat and it would respond to stimuli even from a human, and we can determine that scientifically. That is not the same thing based on the intelligence of that animal than two adults consenting to sexual activity with each other. So I think that while consent is a line that is drawn now, simply determining that an animal is interested in having sex with a human would not be the same thing as humans consenting.
And I think that's exactly why we have age of consent, because it's basically the same thing with a child.
Absolutely.
Because
perfect. Yeah, go ahead, Lewis. No, go ahead.
Because a child.
Excuse me, I don't want to step all over you here, but you're absolutely right.
Because a child could give you consent, but that doesn't mean that they have any idea what the hell is going on and that you may have manipulated them or they may be confused. They might not understand exactly what's happening. And
retroactively, sometimes victims of statutory sexual abuse say, I consented, I wanted to do this. And the law has determined, and we could argue about whether the law has placed the age limit at the exact right spot or not, right? That's a conversation we could have. But the law has determined this is not someone who is developed enough to consent. Their cognitive abilities are not yet such that when they say they are consenting, that they actually understand the full repercussions of what that means. I think it's a very apt analogy.
Yeah, and it could be complicated, with where you draw the age line and the difference between someone who's 15 and 16 or whatever, But generally speaking, I think it would, I mean, I guess we're not really answering the question.
Well,
but,
let's take it a step further. If we could determine that there were some animals that truly could consent in the way that an adult male could consent to sex with another adult male, to use that example that's often used, what then?
What then? Yeah. I have to say that I would still not be in favor of that.
But would it be because of a cringe factor, or would it be because of any specific reason you can identify?
Well, there's the cringe factor, but there's probably also some pretty good medical reasons why this should not be happening.
Yeah, I would assume that there are. So I would say, if you can determine that the animal can truly consent with the same level of understanding of all of the implications that a human can, and if medical science can determine that there is no risk to either the human nor the animal of doing that, then, we're now drawing up a pretty specific scenario, maybe you would have a case as to why sex with animals could be legal, right? But we're now going so hypothetical that it seems very removed from any empirical realities.
We have taken it pretty far, but I guess that's how it would be.
Aaron wrote to me saying, is working to break up a couple ever justified? My friend is in a horrible relationship with an abusive partner who treats her terribly and has cheated many times in the past. We all know what is going to happen, but is it still wrong to try to break them up? This is a very interesting question, Lewis, because on the one hand, Aaron seems to be saying, and it's E-R-I-N, so I believe it's a she. Aaron is saying her friend is in a relationship with a guy who has cheated. The guy is abusive, and she's in a situation where she just cannot see the light. What if we work behind the scenes to try to get them to break up? It's deceptive, but we're doing it for her own best interests. At the same time, you could say, well, who are you to determine what is in her own best interest? And it would be completely wrong for you to make that determination and impose yourself upon her relationship. What's your view generally about this?
I think that there are lots of people who, there are lots of relationships you can look at, and it can be very clear, no doubt in your mind, that that one person is being terrible to the other, and that yes, this is not a relationship that should be happening. And I think that sometimes the person who is being taken advantage of or treated poorly will never come to the realization that this is a relationship they need to get out of. So I think that I am okay with this type of thing happening.
Now, what about the simple fact that as much as you can know about the relationship of two others without being in it, and you could know a lot, right? Maybe your friend is really telling you a lot, that you can never really know everything, and that you may be deciding based on the incomplete information that you have. Now, the counter would be, hey, I know that he's punching her in the face and she will never go to the police about it. And it doesn't matter how good of a guy he is. It doesn't matter how nice he is when he cooks dinner for her every night or whatever, that there's nothing that could possibly make up for punching her in the face. Thus, I need to take action. But there could be other situations that are less like that, right? Where you don't know the full thing. You're convinced it's not going to work because of significant apparent personality disputes or inconsistencies. But you don't really know everything, and you might choose to take an action that you think is fully informed, and it really is not.
And I try not to jump to conclusions. If I see a situation like this, I try to think that way. And I have observed situations that I thought clearly, yes, bad relationship needs to end, and other ones where I say, well, yeah, there's some things happening that aren't ideal, but I don't know everything, I don't see everything. So I'm just not going to comment on it.
But long and short of it, there are situations in which you would see yourself feeling okay, getting involved, working behind the scenes surreptitiously to try to make the relationship end.
If working behind the scenes is what's necessary, yes. If you can't just come out and say this needs to end and you need to be kind of keep it on the down low, yeah, I think that I'm okay with that.
I'm a little more cautious than Lewis. Conceptually, I can dream up scenarios where I would say, I have no choice. I need to try to interject here. But the line would be pretty high for me, because if someone were to try to do that to a relationship I'm in, although retroactively I might recognize that it was the right decision not to be with that person, I think I would certainly harbor resentment. So I would say to Aaron to be very, very careful about this. But Lewis, I mean, it sounds like you're saying to Aaron, if you're sure, then you should go ahead.
if you are sure, make sure you have all the information. Make sure you're making a good decision.
Wow.
That's all I can say. I mean, I don't know the details, but if it's that bad, maybe you have to act.
Send me your thoughts on this. Is it always right to try to act in this way? Is it always wrong? Does it just depend on the scenario? Keep the audience questions coming. We have a great bonus show coming up. Go to davidpakman.com/membership to sign up for that.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.